Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria QK.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. On today's episode, we're going to have some updates on some recent celebrity deaths that we talked about on Mother Knows Death and a couple new celebrity deaths that happened this week. Of course, we have to discuss Casey Anthony's TikTok, someone pooping their pants on a date, a teen without a vagina getting pregnant, and middle schoolers who are tattooing each other. But let's get started with the celebrity news.
As usual, just the most unusual stories of all time. All right, so last week we talked about actress Michelle Trachtenberg's death. She was 39 years old, and as a reminder, she was found unresponsive in her bed by her mother, and she had a history of a liver transplant. So I guess now people are really confused because her cause of death was listed as undetermined, and her family refused an autopsy. So how does that work exactly?
All right, so normally if you die in the hospital, then you don't ever have to get an autopsy unless you want to get one. And then you would just ask the hospital, hey, could you do an autopsy? I'm not sure of the cause of death. But in the case when the medical examiner gets involved, it's a little bit different because the medical examiner, they work for the legal system and they're trying to determine if people were murdered or how they died. So they have jurisdiction over a person's body when it goes there, and then ultimately they can make the decision. A lot of times when they're going to do an autopsy, people have objections, whether it's for personal reasons or they don't want to delay a burial, or usually it's for religious reasons. In this case, it could be for multiple reasons because she's famous, right? High profile person, medical examiner reports are public records, so people would be able to find out information that possibly her family doesn't want to get out about her medical history, such as we were talking about specific reasons that she may have had the liver transplant, and it could have been due to hepatitis C infection. It could have been due to alcoholism. If that was the case, that might be something that her family might be embarrassed by, not embarrassed by, but just not want it out there like that. And another reason is that both of her parents are Jewish, so they might object the autopsy as well. So in those cases, the medical examiner will look at all of the circumstances surrounding the case, and then they will make the determination if they're going to do the autopsy or not.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering that about the Jewish culture too, because I know that in their faith, they typically want to try to bury the body within a 24-hour period. So I was interested if that was a reason for the refusal.
So they have, and listen, I'm no expert of Judaism by any means, but I just know this from working in the field as long as I've been, that they have pretty strict rules to not desecrate the body after it's dead. And they say if pieces of the body need to be removed, especially at an autopsy, like let's say, for example, we take out the brain and we need to look at it 2 weeks later with a neuropathologist, they act like the body's not even getting buried at all if it's not buried in whole. And this is actually a really interesting fact because when Gabe went to the condo collapse in Miami a few years ago, there was a lot of Jewish people there, and they were very specific on collecting all of the human remains for each person and keeping them together because that's very much in line with their religion. Now, they do have some exceptions for autopsies if they believe. So, for example, I guess organ donation would fall under this too. If they believe for whatever reason that the autopsy needs to be done, or I guess organ donation in that circumstance needs to be done in order to save someone's life, whether it's helping with treatments or actually helping a person that's alive live, then they kind of are okay with bending the rules a little bit in that circumstance. But if they ask the medical examiner, please don't do this autopsy, and the medical examiner is pretty certain that she wasn't murdered, then they'll say, okay, we're going to do an external exam. So they're going to look at her body and they're going to go over everything and note anything and see if anything is out of place, everything that they could do without actually cutting her body open. If they were suspicious that it was a homicide, then the medical examiner could say, basically, I don't care what your religion is, we're cutting her open. they could override your requests. We do an autopsy that's very in line with their beliefs of getting buried in whole, because typically when we do an autopsy, we take all the organs out and we keep lots of pieces of them in jars so we could go back to it if we have to after the body's gone. But there is an autopsy technique that we do that's called the Rokitansky, and that is when we open the body and we do what's called an in situ autopsy. So we open it and we just look at all the organs and poke around, but we keep everything in place, sew them up, and send them back. But again, like you were saying earlier, that has a lot to do with them getting buried as fast as possible. And sometimes that's just not possible to do an autopsy and get the body out in a couple hours.
So in a typical autopsy, when you guys are cutting out the organs, in a normal case where you would cut out the organs, do you put them back in the body in bags if the family wants all the piece, or do you, like, how did you put them back in?
Yeah, I mean, we'll use a biohazard bag or even a viscera bag, as it's called. It's just essentially like a plastic trash bag, and we put all the organs in there, and then we put them back inside the body and sew them up and send them back to the funeral director. Now, sometimes like I said earlier, if you have a person that has died from something and their brain needs to be examined, sometimes we keep the brain because we have to fix it in formaldehyde, a formaldehyde mixture, which is stronger than the normal formalin we use for organs. And it could take a longer time to firm up the brain, and we want it to get harder because normally the brain is the consistency of like not even jello, like a very soft jello. And we want to make it firmer. So when we cut the slices, it's very, very smooth slices so we could look at the anatomy. And also you want a special pathologist to look at that. That's called a neuropathologist. And they specialize in brain pathology. So oftentimes maybe a neuropathologist can't look at the brain for a week or two. And so we keep it. It never goes back to the person that goes to the funeral home ever. We'll keep it a couple months and then we'll throw it out with the medical waste after a couple months. But there are circumstances where people aren't buried with 100% of their organs after an autopsy, but we can accommodate it in most cases.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of times these news outlets are reporting on these things. And when I was reading this, I think they did a decent job at explaining it, but hearing it from you, a medical professional, is like easier to digest. Something about the way they explain their protocol after a person dies, they're always trying to make it seem suspicious, right? But in every case, it's not super suspicious.
To their defense, they don't know what they're talking about. So they're just looking stuff up or hearing something and repeating it, and it doesn't translate, right? Because they're not making sense of it. And it sucks because after we recorded on Thursday, it was hours later, I hear, oh, her manner of death is going to be, or her cause of death. I'm not sure if it was manner or cause, but undetermined. So oftentimes too, let's say a person, and I've run across this situation, and sometimes a person's found dead at home. They're 60 years old. They don't really know why they died, but on the external exam, we see that they have like a sternal scar, right? And that would indicate, okay, this person's had open heart surgery at some point. The investigators get the information from their physician, and they call their physician and say, hey, your patient that's 60 some years old just died. Is there a reason that like he should be dead right now? And the doctor might say, yeah, he was having heart failure and we tried this and we tried that. And it's just like he never really got better. And they'll say, will you sign the death certificate? And then the doctor will say, yeah, I'll sign the death certificate. He had a reason to die. That could have happened in this case too as well, that they could have, if they knew that she was rejecting the organ or what, she had to be rejecting the organ because her neighbors were saying that her eyes were yellow. So clearly she was in liver failure again, whatever caused it, I'm not sure. But she was in the hospital, her friend said, so like somebody knew that was taking care of her that she wasn't doing good. And that person might have just said, I'll sign the death certificate. They don't know exactly what was the triggering thing that caused it, but they definitely know that she wasn't murdered. Another situation, in all honesty, is suicide. And that's not a determination to do an autopsy in all circumstances too. They're only doing it to rule out if a person was murdered. So again, that could be something the family doesn't want the public to know as well.
Why though? The suicide thing confuses me though, because I just feel like not that it's super common, but it's not necessarily rare that a person is murdered or something and then it's set up to look like a suicide. So why wouldn't they do it in a suicide, even if there was obvious signs and a note and everything?
They do in most circumstances, but in like a circumstance like this, you could see why they wouldn't do it. There could be, she had a chronic medical illness. There could be a history of her having depression, suicidal ideations. Like, we don't know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Her mom might not be shocked, and it might not even be a medical thing. She might have just been like, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore. And like, with all of this history and the way she was found and her high profile status and her religion, it's a case by case basis.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on to the next two celebrity death updates we have. So, first we have Gene Hackman. Of course, again, right after we recorded, way more information came out. Like, truly, I think we hit stop record and then I was flooded with messages about new stuff, right? So, people had thought it was carbon monoxide poisoning, but it ended up not playing out that way. So, what are the leading theories now? I think you were pretty on the ball with it.
Yeah, so when we spoke last, the carbon monoxide, we already knew that was ruled out because the firefighter said that there was no carbon monoxide reading. Although I believe the next day or the day after, the blood work showed that there was no carbon monoxide. So that's been 100% ruled out. What was new that we didn't hear last week, so we were talking about how long she was there, and you were saying that they said they were there at least one day. Well, now we found out several things. Number one, because I remember texting you right after this came out and them saying something about her body being bloated with signs of mummification and his looking similar.
Yeah, so, when we were originally recording, I had read that they were there at least a day. So in my mind, I'm reading that as, they think it happened within the last day or two, not that somebody's mummified and his pacemaker has data that goes back, 9 days or something?
Yeah, February 17th was the last time it was read. So yeah, I texted Maria and was just like, where did you read one day? Because they were mummified and there's no way that happened in one day. And, so then we start learning other things. So let's talk about a pacemaker for a little bit. So do you know anything about those?
I generally know it's something that helps your heart, but I don't really know anything beyond that. So
you could get them for different medical situations involving the heart. They come in all different shapes and sizes, and they do different things. But the overall thing is that it's a small implantable electric device that helps the heart rhythm stay normal. So some people have atypical heart rhythms. So the thing doesn't necessarily work all day, but when it feels like it needs to, it'll zap the heart and make it continue to beat regularly. Now, it's a piece of metal that goes underneath of the collarbone, and you could grab it on someone and feel it. So this metal is the actual battery of the device, and then there's usually electrodes that lead out of it and go into the heart, like little pieces of wire that are coated in plastic that go into the heart chamber. And some of the newer ones don't even have that, but he probably had one of the old school ones. They're really interesting to do an autopsy with. I got zapped with one time.
Oh my God.
I don't know exactly what happened because I've done so many autopsies with people with pacemakers, and usually I would just, once I'm reflecting the skin, so it's right underneath the collarbone. So when I'm removing the skin off of the ribs, you have these wires that are going into the heart. And usually I would just cut it right there so I could keep the wires in place and make sure they were in place. And one of the times I cut the wires, it zapped me a little bit. It wasn't like it threw me on the floor or anything, but it just freaked me out. So then every single time I did an autopsy after that, I was always like thinking I was going to get like a little zing to my body. And it's not typical. It only happened that one time. It was really weird. But they're so if you have one, you have to tell, if you go to an MRI, you have this huge piece of metal implanted in your body. If you get an MRI, you have to tell them. If you go through a metal detector, it will go off. And they even say that if you use your cell phone, you shouldn't use your cell phone too close to it because it could affect the way that it works.
Wow.
Which is nuts, right? They say to use your other ear to talk on the phone and stuff, which is really interesting. But these things, again, like I was saying, there's all different kinds. So some of them have, they're connected to your doctor's office. So they send reports. So the doctor will set up a schedule and say, every couple weeks, send me a report on this pacemaker, and it'll go. And this way they could tell if something major is happening, like the battery is about to die or something on a person. But it's not continuously monitoring a person. So if a doctor gets a report and says, hey, this person's battery died, like get them in, and then you're able to fix that. Now, because people have too much of a gap in between their doctor's appointments, so this is just a way to kind of keep on top of them a little bit more regularly. They also have they have the ability to continuously monitor people and for even more things that are going on. And I'm not sure which one he had, but I'm assuming he probably had the one that just did the periodic checks, because if it was continuously monitoring him, it would have sent an alert to the doctor right away that it wasn't working anymore, and the doctor would have known. It wouldn't be 9 days or whatever it was. So that's just what I'm assuming, that the doctor did not get the message that the thing stopped working. But they're able to check the log and see, which is, it's kind of crazy that you could have something implanted in your body that they're able to monitor, like the last day your heart was beating correctly.
Well, I always wonder that about the Oura Ring, because I'm like, let's say you're wearing it and you end up dying. It would stop detecting your heartbeat, right? At some
Yeah,
point.
totally, yeah.
So you could really, in theory, if somebody was actively wearing that or an Apple Watch or whatever, one of those devices, you could see like the not exact moment, but give or take around the time in which they died.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, I mean, that's really the only information we got. One other information that we did get that is pretty significant is that they did say that there was no signs of trauma on either body, but then when they did the actual autopsy, they confirmed that there was no trauma on either body. So before, one of my 3 or 4 theories was that she could have fell. And I think at this point that's ruled out. There was no skull fracture. There was no brain bleed. So she died of natural causes as far as that's concerned. And so did he, unless their toxicology comes up with something weird and crazy. We don't know. So it looks like she didn't fall. Now let's talk about the mummification a little bit. She was found apparently. So I believe I was correct about the dog. The dog was locked up and seems like it died from starvation or dehydration or something like that.
I didn't realize at first that the dog was apparently like in a cage or something.
Yeah, it was. I think that I said that last time, that it was in a closet. So I was like, the only reason that dog's dead is because it just was so happened to be in a crate or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that doesn't make the story as weird anymore, because that's what's going to happen if there's an animal that, which is actually terrible to think that the animal was in a cage, just like watching his owner be dead like that. And it also kind of makes me think that their deaths, like ruling out suicide a little bit more, because I feel like if you were doing that intentionally, you wouldn't do that to one of your pets. They were like their babies. You know what I mean? That would just be.
Well, Dr. Bodden had been interviewed for this article we're referencing in particular, and I guess his leading theory was that Gene Hackman may have fell, and then in some type of panic, she ran to go maybe get him medication or something to help him out, and then he also theorized that she might have fell, but then said because of the excitement of Gene falling, she might have then had a cardiac episode too. So I think that's interesting.
I'm going to rule that out, though, because they said there was no trauma. So if you fall, especially if you're 95 years old, there's going to be, like, a 95-year-old, you could, like, bump their arm against the table and have a huge hemorrhage under their skin. You see old people with these bruises all over them all the time. It's called senile ecchymosis. It happens because you don't really have that much subcutaneous fat underneath of your skin anymore. So it's just like a layer of skin on top of your blood vessels, and they just burst super easy. So I'm ruling that out. There was no evidence. Even if she fell, it would just be like, it would have to be so bad that it would leave trauma or something, and it just didn't. So I don't agree with that, honestly.
No, he was saying that Jean fell. She was running. This is his theory. Jean fell. The wife, Betsy, was running to try to get him some kind of care or medication or something, and she either fell or she had a cardiac event that caused her to die because of the stress of him falling or something. That was just his theory. But
I know. But like that didn't happen. It just
Yeah.
didn't. Like there was no evidence that anybody fell. That's what I'm trying to say. So that theory's out the window. There is an unusual condition that's called Takotsubo arteritis, and it's like the broken heart syndrome. So it is possible that he died and then she died of having spasms in her heart. It's just like this weird phenomenon that happens sometimes when people have a severe emotional distress, like losing a loved one, or even if they get really, really scared or something like that. So that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think that's what he was saying as the alternative. She fell or she had a cardiac event.
Okay.
Not so simultaneously.
So regardless, I think that that's completely a possibility. And then obviously, once the toxicology comes back, if they rule out everything with that, that could be fine. There was no evidence of, I wouldn't say they had food poisoning in the sense of what you would typically think with a bacteria, or even if they had something crazy like botulism or something, because there just didn't seem to be any evidence that they were having any kind of like GI or upper GI distress, although that doesn't mean anything if they were clean about it. But I guess in theory they could have gotten poisoned with like arsenic or something too, but like who's doing that? I think didn't they live in a secure like a security guard out front, a gated community or whatever?
That doesn't mean anything. But can they tell if they can't really tell who died first necessarily, right?
Well, they can, depending on the level of decomposition. So this is the thing that's going to be a little bit weird, because she was found, I guess, in the bathroom, and she was in front of a space heater. They didn't say if the space heater was on or not, which would be important. But if you're in a house that's contained and you're in New Mexico, which is already warmer as it is, and it's very dry, you're in the desert, and you're in a house that doesn't have any insects, you breaking down the normal way of decomposing is just a little bit different, because the bacteria needs water in order to break down. And if you're in a very dry environment, that especially if the air conditioner was on, but at the same time, so the wind from the air conditioner is blowing, but at the same time there's a space heater on that's also heating and blowing, it could just dry out the skin. So that would make sense as to why there was mummification. He was found in the house as well.
Yeah. He was in the mudroom and she was in the bathroom.
And where the other two dogs, were they outside?
They said they were roaming around, and I remember last week there was a report that their front door was ajar.
Yeah, I do remember that. So, yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm asking that is because obviously animals in the house that don't have any food, that have dead bodies there, which we are actually going to talk about with the next update, that's what happened. So they didn't say anything that there was evidence that the animals were eating them, but they also aren't telling us everything either. So this is just one of those cases where we just need to wait for the toxicology, because then we could find out more. Also, if they are suspecting that she had a cardiac event or he had a cardiac event, whatever, they're going to take sections of their heart to look at it under the microscope. And that could also take a couple days. And also, you kind of have issues because when a person starts decomposing, sometimes their tissues under the microscope don't look great. And sometimes it's not as easy to figure out why they died. So the biggest thing I guess we're waiting for right now to summarize this all is like, we just have to wait and see what the toxicology says and go from there.
And that could be a couple weeks still, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like in these cases, like whenever it's the high profile cases, they could expedite it. I don't know what their caseload there is in New Mexico, but I mean, they have so many cases, and a lot of times they say like, we're not cutting anyone in line. They're just going to have to wait. So we'll see. And as soon as we find out, we'll do like a breaking news episode talking about it.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the last update we have. So My Chemical Romance drummer Bob Bryar, he was found dead a couple months ago.
We talked about that, right?
We had talked about it, and he was a case where he was severely decomposed, and they had found evidence that his dogs were eating him. And Now the ME is saying that 3 large canisters of nitrous oxide were found next to his body.
Yeah, so nitrous oxide's the stuff that they give you at the dentist, right? Laughing gas. And they give you just enough for you to feel euphoric, and that's why people do whippets, because it's in whipped cream containers and everything. But if you have too much of it, it can replace the oxygen in your blood and on your blood cells, then could cause an asphyxial death, similar to like carbon monoxide poisoning or anything like that.
So, yeah, I guess we've talked about this on here before, how you could just easily buy the canisters, right? Because
Yeah, so
weren't we
they were,
talking about it with like kids on TikTok doing it?
yeah, and you can. Well, they sell it on Amazon, because you could buy it to make your own homemade whipped cream. They sell it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not hard to get. And you could get it from just buying a normal can of whipped cream. I literally have it in my refrigerator right now. I guess they said they found 3 large canisters of the nitrous oxide, but they also said that his body was so decomposed that they weren't really able to say or determine if it was a suicidal, that he killed himself on purpose, or it was an accidental overdose. And I think that that's important to note, because everybody gets a little confused and butthurt about that sometimes. But you have to think about this, like, if the guy just had it because that was his drug of choice and he was getting high on it and that's why he had it, then he didn't mean to die. He just was getting high and he died because he took too much.
Yeah.
Whereas people that kill themselves intentionally ingest a lot of it because they want to die. And that's the difference between putting the manner of death as accident versus suicide. You could argue all the time about it and say, okay, if they were doing it, they knew they were going to die. And it's like, yeah, but that's not how it works.
So would this then be undetermined if they can't officially confirm if he did it intentionally or not?
They possibly put the death as undetermined. They will do an investigation to see if he had, like, now it changes if he had a suicide note there and he had a history of suicidal ideations and all this stuff. And I don't really know about that. But even then, I mean, it's just hard to say, because I believe that they weren't able to get really true levels of it. And because when a person's decomposed, the blood work and everything and the tissues, like I said, break down and you just don't get accurate readings. And apparently a lot of his body was eaten away by his dogs. So, you know, there's a limitations to the autopsy in those cases. And I think he was dead 22 days in his house. So it was significantly decomposed.
I find it interesting we've recently had all these undetermined cause of death with these stories we've covered, because I don't know if you remember, but like sometime last year, maybe the year before, I was doing one of my favorite activities, making a spreadsheet of all the dissections
Wow.
we've covered for the website, and I was breaking them down by manner of death, and we only had, I think, 3 that were undetermined at that time, compared to all the other categories where we had dozens of them in each category. And I think you and I just had a discussion about how undetermined it happens, but it's so uncommon. And now in the last couple of months, it's been almost like in the last week in particular, it's been all these people.
I think it's important to note too, and I'm going to look this up after this episode, but especially when we're talking about Michelle Trachtenberg, I think that all of the articles I read said that her cause of death was undetermined.
Yes.
But there's a difference between a cause of death being undetermined and a manner of death being undetermined. So I'm curious to see if we could pull up the record of her death certificate and see what her manner of death was, because they might have said, okay, her manner of death was natural, so they were 100% sure that she died as a result of her liver failure and from complications from the transplant. So they would still put a natural death, or they could even put suicide as a manner of death, but they could put undetermined, meaning they don't know how she did it, or undetermined cause of death. The same with the natural manner is that we don't know exactly what pulled the trigger and caused her to die, but we know that it was natural causes. So in this case, it would be a little bit different, because they do know that he had ingested this nitrous oxide. What they don't know is why he did it, which would be the manner.
Okay.
And like, we could use this. Another thing we're talking about in a little bit is Casey Anthony, but her manner of death was listed homicide because the medical examiner felt as if there's no reason that a child should be dead in the woods with duct tape on her mouth. There's no natural way that happens.
No.
The kid didn't kill herself.
No.
Okay. And that wasn't an accident. You don't accidentally drop a child with duct tape on their mouth in the woods. So she was certain to call the manner of death homicide. However, the cause of death was listed as undetermined. They don't know if she was, there was questions if she had ether or something. Remember, was it ether?
That was like chloroform.
Or chloroform or something. They don't know if that was a thing, or they couldn't determine exactly what was the thing that caused her to die, but they were certain that it was homicide. So there is a difference between the manner and cause of death being undetermined.
All right, so we had 2 other notable deaths that occur. I mean, this year has so far been like filled with celebrity deaths. So first we have frontman of New York Dolls, David Johansen. He has died at 75 years old. He announced last month that he was suffering from stage 4 cancer, brain tumor, and a broken back. So definitely sad to hear.
One of the things that's interesting is when a person has cancer and it spreads to the bones, they could have what's called pathologic fractures. So they might not even know that they have cancer, and then someone has a small fall and then breaks up one of their vertebral bones or their backbones and goes to the hospital, and then it's like, oh shit. And prostate cancer is honestly like one that's good for that in men, and go to the doctor and see, oh, you have cancer there, and that's what caused the break. But by the time the cancer's in the bones, you're diagnosed at stage 4. So in men, I would most commonly think that situation would be seen in prostate cancer, whereas with women, you would see it most commonly with breast cancer.
Yeah, and then the last, I guess, celebrity adjacent death we have is Dolly Parton's husband of almost 60 years has passed away.
We know this one's hurting you.
It is upsetting because they met in 1964. They've been married since 1966, and it's an accomplishment to be married that long, especially today and especially in celebrity culture.
How old is she?
She's 79. He was 82. I think right now it's unclear how he died, but I mean, he was older, I don't know if he had been battling any illness or anything.
Yeah, well, they were super, super private with him, which I think is very cool, actually, because she's one of the most famous people in the world. And just to think that her husband was able to go to the store and nobody really ever knew who he was is really cool.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about it. So, like, obviously I've read a million books about her and listened to every podcast on the face of the sun about her and, like, everything. So I think it's really cool because they met, and I don't know if you know this, but so they met and they were dating, and her record company really did not want her to get married because they thought it was going to destroy the image they were building for her. So she eloped and was like, F you, I'm doing whatever I want. And they got married anyway. And then when she started getting recognition for her songwriting, he did early on in her career go to one dinner for her where she was getting an award. And when they got in the car, he was like, I want you to have everything you've ever wanted and I'll support you, but I am never going to anything like that ever again. Which I think is cool. So
he's a normal yes, like he's a normal person. And yeah, it is cool because she's got this persona that she puts on, and then it's keeping very distinct lines between work and home, and I like that. There's no mixing. There's no, this guy's just trying to, you have to admire that he was just trying to be himself, and he didn't want to be anybody just because he was associated with her. I'm sure that helped their marriage stay together, honestly.
Yeah, it did. And then I was reading, this article we referenced was saying her like tips to their long-lasting marriage, which is that they didn't really ever get in arguments, and when they sensed there was tension, they'd try to make a joke about it and loosen up the tension. I think they had a really cute relationship that seemed like they were both kind of like ball busters of each other, and I definitely think from both of our marriages, that's kind of in a way how our dynamic is with our husbands too.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, whenever Gabe gets mad, I just look at him and I make like faces, and I'm like, oh, do you want to cry on my and then he just like busts out laughing. It's like, it really like works. It just
does.
when you're going down a hole of like anger and somebody can pull you out of it however it is just by doing something funny, it just like it changes the whole vibe of a marriage. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most successful thing is being able to get out of it and not fighting all the time. I mean, it makes me really sad for her because they were together since she was 18 years old. And think about that. Like the person you've known longest and the most intimately in your life is now no longer here.
I give her 6 months. It's my prediction.
Before finding another boyfriend?
No, I think that there's so many documented cases of a husband or a wife dying and then the partner that has been with them for a very long time dying within a year of that.
Dude, do not put that in the atmosphere.
I'm just making a gambling guess.
All right, well, I don't really like that because I love her, and obviously she will
I don't
die at
either.
some
I don't.
point.
I think she's awesome, and I don't want her to die. I'm just saying that happens often.
You know what was really cute that they did a couple years ago? She was on that Playboy spread, you know, dressed as a bunny, and then she put the outfit back on for him for their anniversary a couple years ago.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I mean, it makes me sad for her, but what are you going to do? At least they had a very long marriage and life together. I mean, you want to hope that if you are madly in love with somebody that you are with each other for most of your life and die in old age, not young and taken away too early, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so freak accidents. Our friend Lauren sent us this terrifying video on Instagram the other day. So, Maria, why don't you tell them about it?
This is horrifying. So last week in New York City, 2 window washers were up on a scaffold 78 floors high. Suddenly, strong winds picked up and started launching this scaffold into the building. They broke a bunch of the windows, and you see in this video, they're just twirling around so high in the air. It's so terrifying.
That job is just like, fuck this anyway, when I see that. Imagine, there's no window in the world that needs to get cleaned that bad. I'm sorry. That is just so terrifying. But I don't think that they really got injured. It seems like they brought them to the hospital and they were fine. It's amazing that no one got injured. Not only those people that were on the scaffold, but the people that were on the ground because huge chunks of glass were flying on the street as the scaffold was hitting the building.
That's what I was thinking. Some total Final Destination. You're just walking to work in the morning and a giant chunk of glass just lands right in your head. How horrible.
It was like, it's a weird kind of glass too. It's probably tempered, but it was thick. Like you could see the thickness of the glass. Obviously, it's going to be thick if it's outside of a building, protecting it from the outside environment. But yeah, it's God. It just looks so terrifying. And luckily, like firefighters were able to go up there and reel them in and pull them in and stuff. I don't even know how you have the balls to do that as a profession. It just terrifies me.
Well, I guess they're looking into the official cause, too, because it seems like the men had harnesses on, but they weren't secured. So why were they not secured? I'm surprised this is the first. I guess this probably isn't the first time something like this has happened, but in the news, it has been probably a while since a case like this has been shown. So I just wonder what they did to make this happen, or if it was just a complete freak, really windy day, and maybe they shouldn't have been out there in the first place. I don't even know.
I told you before that I feel like I said this on the show before, that when I was in one of the pathologist's office at one of my old jobs, that a person was outside and fell like straight in front of us onto the ground and died.
Yeah.
It's so like just the whole profession just seems very
No,
it's just anxiety. I mean, you look at it and you're like, I guess someone has to do it. There's just like no other way they could figure out how to do that at this point.
does somebody have to do it? I mean, does rain not just take care of
No,
it?
it does, because like the hard water and stuff, it gets. I could see it. Like you could even see it in your shower, for example, like on the glass doors. If you don't use your little squeegee thing, the hard water leaves marks and everything, and the rainwater is going to be even worse with just stuff in it. And you're in a building where people live, it's their office, whatever, you have to look outside. I just think that there has to be a better way, or make some kind of repellent coating or something. I'm not sure.
So when they were showing pictures and videos from inside of the building of the scaffold on the outside, I could see right there was where my internship was. The building was right there, and I'm like, can you imagine if I was just there that day and watching it out the window happen? It just would be so
I want to
scary.
hear from those guys, like what they were going through. Jesus.
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, we finally, with regret, we wrote up our bestiality post yesterday. And I say with regret because I was much better off before. I didn't really know anything about it. Obviously, we've talked about it a couple times on this show that there's people that get arrested for having sex with animals, but you just don't know the half of it. And it's really just like mind-blowing, disturbing. So if you don't want to have questionable Google searches on your computer like we now do, you could check out our article on bestiality. We also have some really great stories about a baby who was born with cancer and very unusual vaginal foreign body, very weird case, and talking about schizophrenia and just like how terrible of a disease it is. We were talking, remember last week we were talking about that guy that killed his brother and then ripped his eyeballs out, and there was evidence that he was that he ate the eyeball. There was a fork and knife and the eyeball was missing and stuff. I'm pretty certain that guy has schizophrenia. And I did hear too that he tried to kill himself since he's been arrested because he probably got medicated, and it's starting to all like come together as to what happened, which it's just such a terrible disease. So we talk about that a little bit in the gross room. So check out the bestiality. It won't disappoint.
Unfortunately, I was exposed to horse panties yesterday, which I never want to see again in my life. So I hope you guys enjoy it because Googling...
Who the fuck puts panties on a horse? Like, I can't.
Googling for this article and doing this research without being exposed to anything should have been an Olympic sport, because I mean the terminology we had to search to not accidentally see a clip of something was really difficult, but I mean we did it and it's there. I hope you guys enjoy. Head over to thegrossroom.com for more info and to sign up.
Okay, true crime.
Casey Anthony, aka Top Mom, has surprised everyone this week with joining TikTok and trying to promote a Substack because she claims her new career is going to be as a legal advocate.
Dude, I cannot wait to hear what Nancy Grace has to say about this. Like,
I know.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm surprised that it's taken this long for her to do this because clearly do you have the TikTok on your phone? Like, can you look up and see if she's even got followers and stuff?
She has about 60,000 TikTok followers. She had
in one day, or a couple days.
A couple days. The Substack, she had about 2,000 followers, which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
What is Substack exactly?
It's kind of like WordPress. It's like a blog type of website, but you can set it up like Patreon where you can get subscription money. But like, I don't think you can make it that fun or anything. So it's just straightforward a blog.
Does she have it set up to get money off of it?
Well, I tried to look at the comments and it wanted me to log in, but you could see a couple of her posts. And actually, I don't know if you looked at it at all, but just a couple hours before we recorded this, she made a post that said, quote, "For everyone speaking good, bad, or otherwise, heed your words and make sure you're saying something of substance. Here's the law in Florida about threats, libel, and slander. You don't have to be a Florida resident to be charged. Jurisdiction is where the crime was committed usually. If it's over the internet and you're saying something hateful, slanderous, libel, threatening, bully, etc., the recipient party can request the jurisdiction be in the state where they live, not the state where you committed the act. The internet is not a protected place." So I'm going to go on a limb and say that she's been getting a lot of threatening messages and she's letting everybody know that she knows the law as far as that goes.
Well,
with defamation, slander, all of that.
Listen, I know that like Nance is hardcore, like Top Mom and this and that. And I think that she's shady as shit. But there is a part, I know you guys are going to get mad if I say this. There's a part of me that feels bad for her only because her parents are such disgusting people, in my opinion. That
yeah, I agree with that.
That like a child being born into that environment is like bound to not be okay in the head. So, and she was 19 when it happened, so she was an adult and she should be, you know, whatever happened. I don't believe either side of the story, but I also don't believe it was all her and the parents weren't involved at all either. There's like the whole thing is so weird, and I could speak to it 100% because I was a teen mom. I was even younger as a teen mom. I had parents living together. Like, I didn't live at the house for a period, when I went to college and stuff, when I brought Maria with me. And like, I'm sorry, but my mother would not have let 30 days go by before she was like, you know what? I don't believe you anymore and stuff. Like, my mom would have let like 30 hours go by, maybe. I'm serious. Like, it's so, and then the whole thing of it just, it stinks. Like, I don't know what to believe. So also, I don't really know what to say. Like, if you want to go by the law and everything, like, she got found not guilty of doing that crime. So we have to, if we want to respect it in other cases, we have to respect the decision in this case as well.
Well, yeah, and I think, everybody that's like criticizing her, it's going to be hard. I understand what she's saying. She's trying to put a post out there because I can't imagine the reception has been well at all in her corner. I mean, she cannot have that many supporters. I just refuse to believe it.
I believe that she does.
I think she has
just
more
like
supporters
Kohberger
after
does. Like,
well, I think she has more supporters after that Peacock documentary came out because in my eyes, as somebody that's, this was like my first big true crime case was this case when I was younger. So I'm thinking as somebody that's watched this case unfold for the last, it happened in 2008, the murder. She went on trial a couple years later. So it's been a really long time. This is
2011, she was found not guilty.
Okay, so 14 years ago, she was found not guilty. Okay, so this case has been going on almost 20 years. After I saw that Peacock documentary, I did feel bad for her as well because I was like, wow, her parents really fucking suck. And like, I believe that. And I just think they're bouncing off of each other, going back and forth. I think all three of them are bad people. And I don't know. I just don't know what she thought.
Who were we talking about a couple weeks ago of someone doing something terrible that had terrible parents too?
Terrible that had terrible parents.
Yeah, we were talking about, I don't really remember what the case was, but we were saying, like, if you were raised by these scumbags, like, this is what's going to happen with the, what the hell was it?
I guess what I'm getting at is that before the Peacock documentary, I 100% thought she was guilty. And as people say, it was a miscarriage of justice that she was not convicted in that crime. But you know what? The jury cannot convict somebody if there's reasonable doubt, and there was just reasonable doubt in that case. And like you said, we have to respect the law.
It's the same, and that case got so sensationalized, just like OJ and stuff, and it's just like, okay, OJ, I feel like was even different because I don't think there was any reasonable doubt with OJ. That was like just a whole other set of circumstances. There was never like, I don't know many people that'll be like, I don't know, that doesn't really add up. It's like most people are like, yeah, there was no one else that could have been. It's just, it was a little bit different. And I don't like, wasn't there some shit with the parents that they like, while the kid was missing, or something about them like having some kind of foundation to make money, and then they used the money to buy a boat or so. I don't know. There was just like all of this really weird stuff that rubbed me the wrong way, and then just not reporting it, and certain stories about when she was a kid, and I just thought that was a little weird.
Let's say this was me and you. I committed this horrendous crime. You're my parent. We're very close. You know I've done something like this. Are you gonna go on every news outlet and true crime documentary talking about how I'm the problem? I don't think you're going to publicly go and have this whole campaign saying how I'm this problem and I've always been a problem and everything. You'd want to keep it private. And that's where I find them suspicious, because they're working like overtime to dig her in a deeper hole. You know what I'm saying? Like, her life is already ruined. You don't need to go on every fucking documentary and say how she's a horrible person.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, if I believed that you killed my grandkid, I wouldn't really give a fuck about like saving your name.
No, it's
The
not
thing
about
is,
saving a name. It's just about like what are you trying to accomplish? Like this case happened so long ago and they're still actively going and doing all these interviews.
because that's their livelihood. They're all, I mean, they're all making money off of it. That's how they live. And I mean, they can't, it's not like they could go to a regular job and work ever, either, any of them. Their whole entire identity until the day they die, no matter what, even if some evidence came out that like there was a video that cleared her of it, like her life is ruined and has been since she's 19 years old. And that could very well be her fault. But it also, I just think that the parents didn't get in any trouble for like
aiding and abetting.
I don't know. I know that I've seen Nancy act like the parents are just like,
it was Brian Laundrie we were talking about.
Oh yeah, exactly. So there's another similar situation of a very young person that grew up with really terrible people, and ultimately like Brian Laundrie's responsible for killing Gabby Petito, but also his family is disgusting. So you think about like two gross people raising a kid, they're not going to end up being a normal person and then they're just like barely legal and do something horrible. It shouldn't, all the blame shouldn't be on that person. But
I guess overall, you know, we've talked about her on the show before because she was having an affair with the married man and it wasn't a good look for her. And I understand she's trying to revive her image by being like, I'm going to be this legal advocate for LGBTQ and women's rights. But how do you really think people are going to respond to you? They're not forgetting this case. Most people think you killed your child.
Well, listen, the bottom line is that the kid's dead and nobody protected that kid. That's another thing too. Like, if you thought your daughter was such a horrible piece of shit, why did you even let her take that baby out of the house? Like, and I guess you could say, well, she had custody and she was an adult and this and that, but I don't know. Just that case, we could like beat that thing to death. It's just like, whatever. I'm surprised that, because she seems to be a little narcissistic, like I'm surprised that it took this long for her to realize that she could really capitalize on this. And if 60,000 people in a couple days are already interested, she's going to end up being some kind of influencer, and who knows, maybe she'll be the next Nancy because she's trying to compete for her job, I think.
Well,
it's almost like she's like, fuck you, I'm out of jail now and I'm going to take your job over. I'm going to do your same job.
I can say with confidence that Peacock paid her a pretty penny for that documentary. But I'm surprised she hasn't written a book yet. You know what I mean? Maybe, well, you know what? I'm thinking, this is my prediction, is that on the 20th anniversary of the death of the kid, the book's going to come out.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know what she's trying to accomplish. Like, your name is forever smeared as being a child killer, even though she's not convicted of it. I'm just saying,
listen,
when you think of her name, that's what you think about.
I don't think like, I'm surprised it took her this long. I just don't, I don't blame her because she needs to make money. Like, she
has had a job. It's not like she hasn't worked in 20 years. She's been working with one of the lawyers for her case.
Yeah, but how, like, I don't know, how much is she actually making doing that, you know? I don't know.
All right, let's move on to this next story in Iowa. So last October, police arrived to this house after a child had called 911 for help. When they got there, the kid was holding their baby brother and said that they had found him unconscious. So according to this affidavit, this baby had fallen into a bucket of bleach water, which resulted in his head being submerged in the bleach water for an undisclosed amount of time, and he suffered acute respiratory failure and a loss of consciousness as a result.
So did the kid live? Because I didn't even realize that this was an old case. Like, why is it coming out now? Because they got convicted finally? Or?
So this is what's confusing to me because the parents just got arrested this week. So why did it take all these months to investigate this case? But I guess when they went in the house, they were looking for additional evidence, and then they found that the house was just completely infested with mice and filthy, and there was 3 children living in the house. But why did it take so long for the parents to get arrested for neglect?
Yeah, it's also crazy too because you said that the kids called 911. So they were at home with the parents at the time, and they were only 4 and 6 years old. So imagine a 4 and a 6-year-old knowing that something was wrong before the adults in the house. And the thing that really pissed me off about this story was that apparently the DYFS people were investigating this family 4 other times for 4 months, and not for 4 times. For 4 months they were investigating them prior to this arrest. So
why did it take so long if children were
I don't know, but it's really upsetting. So that system is so broken, and you just hear about this stuff all the time. And I guess at the same time, it's just a double-edged thing because you do want people to not overly jump and take people's kids away when they don't deserve to, because people certainly get falsely accused of things too. But I feel like once the moment you walk into a house and see that people, because with rats or mice around, and the pee and the urine carries disease, and that's enough reason to take away the children, in my opinion. And I don't know what happened to this baby just inhaling bleach and getting it on that little baby skin.
I would say the kid did not die, because then the charges would be different. Their charges were child endangerment.
But I mean, bleach could cause chemical burns and irritation of the mucous membranes for a regular adult human. Imagine on like that delicate baby skin. It's so gross.
No, it really is. I mean,
are they like on drugs or something? What's the excuse?
I would assume they're on drugs, because why are your children? They seemingly were in the house when 911 got there. So why is your kid calling the cops when you're in the house? And how is a kid unattended in bleach water for a quote undisclosed amount of time? How long does that mean?
I have no idea. Okay. I hate talking about stories like this. Let's get on to some really important medical news and people who poop their pants.
Yeah, this is a really important story.
It's breaking news.
This chick went on TikTok and said she was on a very romantic date with this guy. It was their 10th date, and she felt pretty comfortable with him. So on this date, they had picked up sandwiches, and they were sitting on blankets in the back of the car watching the sunset. She said at that moment she decided to let out a, quote, small toot. And unfortunately, afterwards, she realized that she shit her pants.
That's called a shart. My kid's new favorite word. I guess that this has happened to everyone at some point in their life.
This has not happened to me, so.
Oh, well, I guess I won't say it happened to me either.
Well, now you have to share with the class.
It's happened to me a couple times, honestly.
A couple times?
Yes. When I was younger, I used to just get, like, I don't know, I just had really, really bad, like, I would just get these really bad stomach pains out of the blue and have to go to the bathroom right away. It was probably because I had, like, an asshole boyfriend that was giving me anxiety all the time or something. But it's happened to me a couple times, honestly. And that's not even bad compared to some people, right? But I think the key is that the guy that she was dating is a first responder. So, which I feel like is kind of the best person to date, because they don't really get grossed out by much, because they see so much crazy shit at their job that they're kind of like, okay, so if I was hanging out with Gabe and I was just like, babe, I just shit myself by accident, like we have to go home, he would just be like, he wouldn't be grossed out. He would just be like, okay, whatever, let's do this. And
And in this case, she fully admitted to doing it, and they just started laughing about it because it's ridiculous, you know? But he jumped into action because he knew it's too.
The best part is that she said she was wearing a one-piece jumpsuit and it was trapped in there, so she took off her whole outfit. Like, this is the kind of thing that you're like, okay, you know, these people are meant to be together, because after 10 dates, like, you're getting more comfortable with a person, but you're still not like in pooping in front of them mode yet. Right. And this lady, like, not only pooped in front of him, but then like took off her whole entire jumpsuit and got naked in front of him. And he gave her a blanket and wrapped her up and like helped take her home and stuff. But could you imagine just like leaving this jumpsuit at the side of the road that's like filled with shit? People that clean up the roads are probably finding like really neat stuff. I'll tell you that.
Well, now they've been together for 6 years and they are engaged. They've been able to make light of the situation. Her friends and family started calling her Poopy Butt, and then whenever one of them in the couple says that their stomach hurts, they just call each other Poopy Butt.
That's great. She could probably get like her wedding sponsored by Imodium AD or something.
Yeah, probably.
Wait, speaking of first responders, a funny story. I totally forgot to tell you this. So this weekend, my parents come over like once a month and I cook like a big dinner and stuff like that. And of course, Maria and Ricky were too cool guy to come over, so they weren't here.
I had text at 9:45 in the morning that's like dinner tonight. You know I need more notice than that.
That doesn't matter. All right. So anyway, so I was cooking chicken parm and I was cooking the pasta to go with the chicken parm on the oven. So we're in my kitchen. Gabe is sitting on the side of the island where the refrigerator is, and Louie standing on the other side, and he's kind of talking to me as I'm cooking, and we're talking to Gabe. So I had this chicken parm in the oven. I take it out of the oven, and it was on a cookie sheet. I take it out of the oven and I put it on top of the stove, and I turn around and I look over, and the parchment paper is literally on fire, like a flame fire. And I'm like, so me and Louie look at it at the same time, but I don't scream or anything because I'm like, oh my God, Gabe's going to yell at me so bad, right? So I go over there and I like grab it and essentially like smother it with my hands. My hand's fucking destroyed and burned, right? And the whole entire time, Gabe is sitting there, like literally he's 2 feet away from this happening. He didn't look up. He didn't notice it happened. And he's sitting there playing on his phone. And me and Louie were like cracking up laughing. He didn't even ask why we were laughing. He didn't turn his head. We were dying. We're like, so then later in the dinner, you know, because when you burn yourself, it's like it kind of hurts. And then all of a sudden, like within a half hour, you're like, ow, this is the worst pain ever, you know? So I'm sitting there and he's like, what happened? And I just was like, oh, you didn't notice that I caught the kitchen on fire right in front of your face? And like, we were just laughing so hard. And he's like, I don't want to know. And I was like, you should know because you were sitting right there. It happened. Like me and Louie were dying. We were like, he should, if that was on tape, that would have, like, people would have thought it was a setup that he just didn't even pay attention. It was great.
I mean, when he's on his phone, he's pretty zoned out.
Oh, he's the worst. I feel like I could like text and post and have a conversation with 3 people and still have a conversation with him, and he just like can't like walk and chew gum at the same time. It's so funny. All right, anyway, get into the next story because this is a good one.
All right, so recently this story came up about a Scottish woman who thought she had a burst appendix only to find out that she was pregnant. And I guess when this story was circulating, this case from 1988 resurfaced, which is absolutely insane. But in South Africa,
kind of has nothing to do with this case, but like it also is a good story, so we'll share it.
Yeah. In South Africa, this 15-year-old girl was admitted to the hospital for abdominal pain. So, of course, if you're a woman and you've ever gone to the emergency room for abdominal pain, the first thing they're going to do is give you a pregnancy test. So she gets a pregnancy test, and it's revealed that she is 9 months pregnant. So you must be thinking, how are you, 9 months pregnant and don't have any idea? Well, this case is pretty unusual based on what's going on in this particular girl's body.
Yeah, so she's 15. And they say, you're 9 months pregnant. And she's just like, I can't be pregnant. Why? Oh, because I don't have a vagina. So that's crazy. And they're like, what do you mean? Oh, she was born with a condition called vaginal atresia, which is when the vagina doesn't properly form right. And in most cases, if a baby is born with something like that, they could fix it. But they didn't fix it in this woman. So she had no vaginal opening to the point where she tried to have sex. a couple times. I mean, she's 15 years old too, but tried to have sex a bunch of times and then just decided that her preference was oral sex because she was able to do that. And I can't even believe that this is like a case written up in a medical journal because it just really is so outrageous. So apparently she was giving a guy a blowjob and swallowed, and then her ex-boyfriend had walked in soon afterwards and found out about it and started stabbing her. And when he stabbed her in the stomach, the semen left her stomach, made its way into her abdominal and pelvic cavity, and then it impregnated her. It made its way down near her ovary, somehow got into her fallopian tube and impregnated her. I still cannot believe that this is true.
This sounds so
it's so
ridiculous
outrageous
and far-fetched.
It's so outrageous. This is like the theory of how she got pregnant because they don't know otherwise how it was possible. You know, I need to really like do a deep dive into this case because I think that this explanation is outrageous. So then people bring up the fact, well, the stomach acid is, you know, you have hydrochloric acid inside of your stomach and it's so strong that it would kill the sperm and they wouldn't be able to live. But then the doctors are saying, yeah, but she was living in South Africa and she was malnourished and she didn't have proper stomach acid production and that's what caused the sperm to survive. And like, I guess in theory that this is possible. Weirder things have happened. I would be more inclined to think that there was something else going on, but I don't know. So we're just reporting it because it was in the news this week and it's interesting.
And I guess because of her age and circumstances, there's like no possible way she could have gotten IVF and just I don't know. This seems so like mythical legend to me. I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around it.
I'm thinking, I'm just saying this out loud, what could be more likely, possibly, and I don't even know, is sometimes you could have a fistula between the anus and the vaginal canal, like the top of it, because when you have vaginal atresia, sometimes it's just like, there's almost a piece of skin over the vaginal opening, but some of it's open at the top, if you could bypass it. And if the rectum and the top of the vagina were communicating somehow and she was having anal sex and it could have went in that way.
Well, we had a case about that not too long ago.
I just like, I feel like that would be, but like they would have ruled out if she had a fistula. So I just don't know. I just think that this is so far-fetched. It's just so far-fetched. I mean, I guess in theory, when the ovary gets released, right? Because it's next to the fimbria ends, like, you know, the little finger ends of the fallopian tube.
Mm-hmm.
When the ovary gets released, it is in the middle of the pelvic cavity, kind of unprotected for a short period of time before it gets into the tube. And that's how you can get like ectopic pregnancies, not in the tube, but actually ones that are like in the abdomen.
Okay.
So if you get stabbed in the stomach, it's going to pour your stomach contents into your abdomen and your pelvis, so it could get down there. It's just like, it's so outrageous to even think about it. Like, just saying it out loud sounds crazy to me.
Well, let's move on to another outrageous story. So at a middle school in Texas, students were passing around a needle to scrape their skin with temporary ink to give themselves DIY tattoos.
This story is so wrong on so many different levels. These kids are in 6th grade. They're my daughter's age, Lillian's age.
11 years old.
11 years old. And listen, kids do dumb shit. So you can't, like, kids, somebody's like, hey, let's give each other a tattoo, and they all do it. The problem is that they were using a needle and they were sharing the same needle around the classroom, which is just so bad. Not to mention the fact that they were scarring their bodies. And this boy, little boy, he's 11 years old. And you have to mention that these are children because, like, where the fuck were the adults in this situation that this was happening? I mean, you could see maybe it happening for a minute or two and then a teacher being like, whoa, what's happening? No, they were unattended for quite some time to do this.
It was going between multiple classrooms and multiple students.
This boy engraved "I Heart My Lord" on his arm and JC on his hands.
But not little. That he scraped his
11.
entire forearm
Oh, I
and
know.
wrote this.
It's his entire forearm. So I'm like, okay, on one sense, the mom should be like, well, at least he wasn't tattooing, his girlfriend's name or something stupid. He was saying, I heart Jesus
Like
forever,
in
right?
Fear when Mark Wahlberg does this and puts Nicole forever.
Yeah, I think Gabe should get that tattoo. So anyway, but the other part of this disturbing story is, what the fuck is temporary ink? Like, what are they talking about? You could get, if you're engraving anything and putting an open wound and you put anything in there, it could leave you a lasting scar that could be pigmented. You could get a permanent tattoo from a pencil getting underneath your skin. Like, what is invisible ink? I've never even heard of it. Unless it's like, or temporary ink.
Is it like a water-based ink that washes off?
Possibly. But I just don't even know. I mean, it's just, the whole entire thing is so weird. But if you're scraping inside your body hard enough and writing "I heart my Lord" and it's deep enough, it could leave a scar on the arm that looks like that forever. Like, I don't.
Well, imagine getting this call from the school nurse that this happened to your kid, and now you have to go get blood work to make sure that they don't have any crazy infections or anything.
Yeah, and I still don't. They said, oh, we got the kid blood work and it came back negative. Well, guess what? Like, that doesn't mean, that's not going to happen right away. That kid needs to be monitored, and I don't even know what to say. I mean, I guess the likelihood of a classroom of 11-year-olds having anything major is not. God, could you? I'm thinking about getting a call from the nurse like that. I just can't even imagine.
No, you only get them when the kids, like bump their elbow into the playground.
The nurse at the last school was literally like the worst. The calls every day. It was just like, she was on the swing and she fell and her knee hurts. And I'm like, okay, we'll tell her to shake it off. That's my response. Well, she's really upset. Can you come get her? And I'm like,
she's upset because she's 8 years old and she's fell
upset.
down.
Yeah, and she knows that you're gonna call me and I'll come get her. And I'm just like, no. Anyway, this is kind of more valid concern, and it's just like, add it to the list of things you never think about. Oh, your kid's gonna go to school and then you're gonna get a call that they were exposed to a bloodborne pathogen that day or something. Like, what the fuck? And it's like, are they doing? I know they said did they fire the teacher or
suspended?
I mean, I don't know. I guess kids could hide it. I mean, you hide notes.
Yeah, but that many children hid it between multiple classrooms and multiple teachers.
Wait, it said that there was more than a dozen parents said their children were inked.
Yeah, so they don't. Yeah, I wanted to close up with that, which is they don't know the exact number of children that partook in this, but yeah, at least a dozen parents have complained. So that's really great. All right, well, let's move on to questions of the day. Every Friday at the @MotherKnowsDeath Instagram account, you guys can head over to our story and ask whatever questions you want. First, do you think AI will ever do autopsies?
I think there's a lot of programs now that exist for that. They're called virtual autopsies. I don't think they're as good. I mean, this is my thing, especially with doing autopsies. You have to think that a lot of it is for helping medical students, pathology residents learn how to do other things and learn about medicine. So if surgery students, for example, are just doing virtual stuff, like, they're not going to be doing virtual surgery. They're always going to have to be going in and cutting the organs with their hands and like looking at things and seeing when things are abnormal. And it's definitely great to have the advancements for sure in some circumstances, but it's nothing like the real thing. And I'm not sure that it would ever get to the point where we would never want to examine the body, especially because, like I was saying earlier, if we see something, you need to take sections from microscopy. It might help make autopsies a little bit less gruesome. Like, let's say, for example, the AI technology can determine that their cause of death was caused by something in the heart, then maybe we could just go directly to the heart and take that out instead of examining the whole body. But there's so much more to it than just diagnosing death. It's also to help with medical students and other professions like mine, pathology or physician's assistants or anything like that.
2, why transport a body from the coroner to an out-of-county hospital for autopsy?
Well, everything's different in every single state and even within states' jurisdictions. So a coroner system isn't the same as a medical examiner system. So sometimes coroners use hospitals to do the autopsies because they don't have their own morgue. I would say that that would probably be the case. So let's say, for example, someone dies and the coroner, they look at it and think, okay, this person needs a forensic autopsy. I'm going to send this body somewhere else so a forensic pathologist can do the autopsy. And sometimes they would do that at a hospital. We actually, one of the hospitals I worked at, we had forensic cases going there, and a forensic medical examiner was coming in to do the autopsies at the hospital.
Okay. All
Is
right.
is that clear? Is that answering the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have mom guilt when I was younger with school or work, and how did you deal with it?
I think everybody has some kind of mom guilt, but I guess when I was younger, it was more like, I have to do this. I'm a single mom and I have to do this. So it wasn't a ton of guilt. Whereas now I can make more decisions, especially because I have another income and stuff, that I could be like, all right, I don't always have to be gone as much or work as hard, because that's taking time away from the kids that like I don't have to be taking away from them. It would just be for my own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like when I was, I guess 13, you sat me down and you were like, listen, I'm going to get my master's degree, and the next 2 years are going to suck, but it's going to be worth it and change our life. And it did. You know what I mean? I'm sure it wasn't an easy 2 years for you to be at school and work full time and then trying to be a parent to me at the same time. But
I was a single mom and I was making $50,000 a year. It never was going to carry us. Like, it just wasn't happening. So I had to go back to school. And the only thing that I knew to make more money was to go back to school to get a bump in salary. So it just, if we ever wanted to move out of an apartment and own a house and all that stuff, and like I've said earlier, like, this is all me. I don't care what Gabe was doing, if I was dating him, whatever. Like, you do this for yourself. So if me and Gabe had broken up, I'd still be able to have my house and everything like that. So it was just kind of like, this has to be done. Now, like, there's definitely things that I would want to do. I'm really into gardening or cooking or stuff. There's like classes I want to take, but then now I'm kind of like, well, I don't really have to do that. I'm going to take time away from my kids. It's just different when you have to versus not. And I think when you're a parent, you always have to juggle that, because and Gabe even went through this for a while when the kids were little. Like, he always wanted to work overtime every single time it was offered. And then it took him a very long time to learn that, okay, maybe I don't need to work overtime all the time, because that extra money isn't as worth as much as like me being around more. It's always a balance, you know?
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. If you have a story for us, please submit it at stories@motherknowsdeath.com or shoot us a message on Instagram.
Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology, so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.